Ash Grove Lane was the kind of road people drove through quickly, never slowing down, never opening their windows, never walking their dogs along its cracked sidewalks. Even the mailman delivered to the houses on that street with a strange uneasiness, as though the air itself resisted visitors. At the farthest end of the lane, past the sagging telephone poles, past the yellowed grass and the abandoned culverts, past the warning signs that had become permanent fixtures, sat the house no real estate agent would list, a place every resident knew to avoid, a place that had never been sold, never been shown, never been photographed since the day it was built. Yet tonight, someone parked in front of it. Evelyn Harrow, a real estate agent with 15 years of stubborn grit, shut off her car engine and stared at the house through her windshield. She had been warned, not by her colleagues, but by the uneasy silence that seeped through the office every time the property was mentioned. No one wanted to deal with it. No one wanted to speak its address aloud. The house had become a whispered dare, a story used to haze new hires, a joke that wasn't really a joke. But tonight, Evelyn wasn't interested in ghost stories. She was interested in a paycheck. And the anonymous buyer who contacted her directly without going through the agency had offered a life-changing commission if she dared to assess the property and list it privately. Her fingers tightened around the steering wheel. The house waited for her, dark and still, like it had been holding its breath for years. She stepped out of her car. The wind wasn't moving, but the trees on the property shivered in a slow, unnatural rhythm. Their branches swayed not forward or backward, but circularly, as if stirred by something unseen. The ground felt softer beneath her heels than it should have been, almost sponge-like, causing her to glance downward twice to assure herself it was just normal soil. The front gate stood crooked, one hinge broken, the other barely hanging on. She pushed it gently and it squealed loudly, not the high-pitched squeal of metal, but the deep groan of something alive. She froze, her breath fogged in front of her despite the night being warm. She swallowed back the instinct to leave. Evelyn wasn't a coward. She had dealt with hoarders, squatters, abandoned meth houses, and angry tenants who threw objects at her head. A creepy old home wasn't enough to scare her off. At least, that's what she told herself as she made her way up the broken path toward the porch. The house came into full view. Its windows were blackened with layers of grime, its wooden siding peeled in sheets. The porch sagged so heavily it looked like it was kneeling rather than standing. She approached the door and reached into her pocket for the set of keys the buyer had mailed to her with no return address. She inserted the rusted key. It resisted at first, then turned, smoothly, too smoothly, like it had been well oiled from the inside. Evelyn stepped inside. The air was wrong. The stale, suffocating darkness inside was unlike any home she'd entered. It didn't smell like mold or dust or abandonment. It smelled like the absence of life, a cold emptiness, a vacuum where breath should have existed. She lifted her phone to shine a light, but the moment the beam hit the walls, her screen flickered and died. "What the hell?" she whispered. Her phone rebooted itself, showed the Apple logo, then shut off again. Dead. She took a slow breath, grounding herself. The faint moonlight slipping through the boarded window helped her eyes adjust. She could make out furniture, old, outdated, but arranged as though someone had lived here recently. A fully set dining table sat to her left, a coat draped over the back of a chair, a pair of shoes neatly placed by the entrance, everything untouched but arranged with purpose. Her voice trembled without permission. "Hello? Is anyone here?" No answer. Only the quiet, settling sounds of the house, like long-held tension releasing. Creaks, groans, subtle shifts in the floorboards. She stepped farther inside. To the right, a staircase spiraled upward, the railing cracked, the carpet frayed. Something on the landing caught her eye. A dark shape. Round. Perfectly still. She squinted. A child's ball. Bright red. So out of place in the sepia-toned gloom that it looked like a fresh wound in the middle of the hallway. She slowly approached. The floor beneath her creaked rhythmically as though matching the pace of her heartbeat. When she reached the ball, she crouched slightly to examine it. The surface looked too glossy, too clean, as though it had been placed minutes earlier. She touched it. The ball rolled. Not down the stairs, not toward the walls. It rolled away from her, straight down the hall, without losing speed, without wobbling, without any incline to explain its movement. It traveled as though drawn by a magnet, stopping at a closed door near the end of the hallway. A cold wave washed over her skin. Okay, that's not normal, but curiosity pushed her forward. She followed the path the ball took, each step heavier than the last, as if gravity thickened around her. When she reached the door, she noticed something carved in the wood, not vandalism, not scratches, not a name. Words etched deeply by hand. Do not enter. It wasn't a warning someone would leave for strangers. It felt like a message carved by someone desperate, someone terrified. She reached toward the doorknob. It turned itself. Evelyn gasped and stumbled back. The door creaked open, inch by inch, as if something inside had been waiting, listening, responding. She shined her dead phone's dark screen toward the open gap, hoping for any reflection of movement. Nothing. Only thick blackness. Then a whisper. Very soft. Too soft, but undeniably there. Don't try to sell this house. Evelyn froze, her blood turning molten in her veins. Her breath caught as she watched the darkness inside the room shift like fabric being pulled taut. Then something moved. Not a shape, not a person. A shadow, detached from any object, sliding across the floor, toward her. She stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the ball behind her. The whisper grew clearer, dissecting itself into multiple voices overlapping as though spoken by a crowd in perfect unison. Leave. Not yours. Don't list it. Then, run. The shadow surged at her. She didn't think. She turned and sprinted down the hall, the floorboards slamming under her feet like frantic heartbeats. The front door seemed impossibly far away, stretching further with every step she took. The air thickened, pulling at her clothes like grasping fingers. She shoved her shoulder into the front door and burst outside, tumbling onto the porch and rolling into the dirt. The wind had returned, but the air outside felt wrong too, warmer, heavier, as though something had been exhaled from the house behind her. She scrambled to her feet, ran to her car, and slammed the door shut. Her hands trembled violently as she jammed the keys into the ignition. The engine sputtered, then caught, and she peeled out of the driveway, not daring to look at the house again. Only when she reached the main road did she finally look at her phone. It was on again. A single notification blinked. New voicemail, unknown number, 1 minute ago. With dread curling through her stomach, she pressed play. A voice whispered through the speaker, soft, layered, identical to the one she heard inside the house. We told you not to enter. She threw the phone into the passenger seat. The house at the end of Ashgrove Lane wasn't abandoned, and whatever lived inside it had spoken to her directly. Evelyn didn't go home. She drove until the trembling in her hands stopped, until her breath stopped hitching in her chest, until the echo of the whisper in the voicemail finally faded from her ears. She found herself parked in the lot of a deserted gas station on the edge of town. The neon sign flickered erratically overhead, humming like a nervous insect trapped in glass. She sat there for nearly 20 minutes before forcing herself to replay the voicemail. The whisper returned, layered and unnatural. We told you not to enter. She flinched, dropping the phone into her lap. Her pulse thundered, her body rigid with the memory of the shadow that had moved toward her, alive and deliberate. Something was wrong with that house, something far beyond structural damage or abandonment. And yet, someone wanted her to list it. Someone had contacted her directly, bypassing every normal channel. Someone had sent her the keys. Someone was expecting her to return. Evelyn wasn't sure if she intended to go back, but she needed answers. There was only one place to start: back at the office. The Harrow & Co. Realty office was dark when she arrived, save for the dim glow of the emergency exit sign near the ceiling. It was after 10 p.m. and the building was supposed to be locked, but the door clicked open easily when she tried it. The security lights inside flickered awake, casting long shadows that reached across the empty cubicles. Her heels clicked softly on the polished floor as she walked toward the records room. Every agent who had been with the company for longer than a few years had whispered something about the property, but no one talked openly. No one volunteered information. No one wanted to be associated with it. But records didn't lie. She pulled open the heavy door to the archives and stepped inside. The room smelled faintly of paper and cold metal. Rows of filing cabinets lined the walls, labeled by region, date, and property type. She found the section marked Ash Grove Lane Properties. Her hand hovered. Files were missing. Entire sections were empty, drawers containing only dust and the faint outline of where folders should have been, as though the documents had been removed intentionally. Her heart thudded. Someone didn't want records of these properties kept. But one drawer remained, half stuck, rusted, stubborn. She tugged once, twice, then braced her foot against the cabinet and pulled with all her strength. It screeched open, metal grinding loudly against metal. Inside were only 3 files. Just 3. All marked with dates years apart, all containing the same address, the house at the end of Ash Grove Lane. She pulled out the earliest file first. File number 1, 1998. The photo clipped to the front of the folder was faded, but the house was unmistakable. Same sagging roofline, same crooked gate. But what caught her attention was the man standing on the porch, a real estate agent, smiling stiffly at the camera. On the back, someone had scrawled a note. Last seen 3 days after this photo was taken. Evelyn's blood ran cold. She shuffled through the file. Inspection notes, a partially filled evaluation form, a handwritten note from someone named Douglas. Do not attempt to enter the back room. If the door is open, close it immediately. She stopped breathing. The back room? The room with the carved warning? She turns the pages faster. At the bottom of the stack was a police report. The agent's car was found abandoned at the end of Ash Grove Lane, engine still warm, keys in the ignition, doors open. The agent himself was never recovered. No signs of struggle, no tracks, no blood. Just gone. File number 2, 2007. The second file contained more photos. This time the agent was a woman, her arms crossed, unimpressed, standing in front of the house as if mocking it. A flyer was attached. Open house canceled. No explanation. The notes were frantic, almost illegible in places. The handwriting slanted wildly. Something moves in the walls. I thought it was rats. It isn't. Voices under the floor, under my feet. Someone keeps whispering my name. The door won't stay locked. Do not go upstairs. Then, abruptly, the notes stopped. Another police report. The agent was found wandering the woods behind Ash Grove Lane, barefoot, disoriented, repeating a single phrase. It followed me out. Don't let it follow you out. She had no memory entering the house. 2 weeks later, she left town permanently. File number 3, 2018. The third file made Evelyn's skin crawl the moment she opened it. The contents were minimal. No photos, no notes, no evaluation papers, just a single sheet of paper with typed text. Agent refused assignment. Claimed the house called him by name over the phone. No record of any call being placed. And beneath that, one more line handwritten in red ink. Do not send anyone else. Evelyn's breath trembled. Someone had sent her anyway. Not through the office, not through official channels. Someone who knew the warnings, someone who ignored them, or someone who wanted her inside that house. Her stomach tightened. She needed to know who had contacted her. Maybe the call log on the office line held something. She hurried out of the archive room, down the hall toward her cubicle, and woke up her waiting computer. The screen flickered longer than usual before loading. The system hummed, the fans turning louder, as if the machine were straining. She opened the voicemail inbox. There it was. A message timestamped earlier that morning. The number was blocked. She pressed play. Her blood froze. The voice wasn't human. Not fully, not exactly. It was layered with something else, something that made the hairs on the back of her neck prick upright. "Evelyn, come see the property. You're the only one who can list it. Come alone." The office felt suddenly colder. She replayed it. There was breathing behind the voice, slow, deep, wet, as though something large and heavy were exhaling into the microphone. Her throat tightened with dread. This wasn't a buyer. This wasn't a client. This wasn't anyone looking to purchase real estate. Something from inside the house had reached out. Something aware. Something choosing her. She grabbed her back and backed away from her desk. The office around her shifted oddly in her peripheral vision, the shadows deepening as though the overhead lights were dimming. She tried to steady her breathing. Then the phone on her desk rang. She jolted. It rang again. The display showed unknown caller. Her heart hammered. She didn't answer. It rang a third time, then stopped. The silence after the ringing was worse, thick and expectant, preparing, waiting. Her desk phone pinged. A new voicemail icon appeared. Her hands shook violently as she reached toward the handset, unable to stop herself. She pressed play. This one was whispered too. Too close, too familiar. "Evelyn." She froze. "You came once." A silence followed, long enough to feel deliberate. "Come back." Then, "You left the door open." Evelyn's breath caught. She hadn't touched the door. She had only watched it open on its own. She had run before she could do anything else. But something inside that house, something watching her, believed she had left it open, and it wanted her to return. Her phone vibrated violently in her bag. She looked down. A text message appeared from an unknown number. "Come back, before it gets out." Her heart stopped. The house wasn't trying to keep people out. The house was trying to keep something in. Evelyn drove home with the text message burned into her thoughts like a brand. Every passing streetlight seemed dimmer than the last, dipping the world into deeper shades of uneasy shadow. Her pulse thudded like a second heartbeat in her ears. She kept imagining the house at the end of Ashgrove Lane behind her, stretching its long broken silhouette across the city, reaching for her like something starving. The message repeated in her mind over and over. "Come back, before it gets out." She didn't know what it was. She didn't want to know, but she also knew she wouldn't sleep until she had some grasp on what was happening. When she finally reached her apartment, the lights in the hallway seemed too bright, artificial, almost humming with static. Her nerves were raw, her senses overstimulated. Each footstep echoed sharply against the walls, sharper than normal, like the building itself was holding its breath. She fit her key into her door. It didn't turn. She jiggled it once, twice, then forced it harder. It clicked, then the door opened far too easily. Evelyn froze. She was certain she had locked it. She always locked it. She hesitated, then slowly pushed the door open. Her apartment was dark, quiet, still, but not empty. She could feel it, something thick and heavy lingering in the air, the faintest sense of movement just beyond her peripheral vision. Her hand reached instinctively for the light switch. She flipped it, and the lights flickered angrily, the bulbs flashing like frantic pulses before buzzing to life. Her living room came into view. Nothing out of place, no sign of intrusion, no sign of a break-in. Except her eyes landed on her table. Her keys were not where she left them. She always placed them on the small dish beside the door, always. But now they sat on her kitchen counter, perfectly aligned, as if deliberately arranged. Her stomach cinched tight. Something had been here. Something had moved through her space, quietly, intentionally. She scanned the rest of her apartment, her breath faltering as she searched. The curtains were slightly parted, though she had closed them tightly that morning. Her bedroom door was cracked open. She always kept it shut. And then she noticed something far worse. The closet door in the hallway was open. Just a sliver. just enough to show darkness inside. But she had not opened it. Her throat tightened. She took one slow step toward the closet. The air seemed to cool around her, as if the temperature dropped only in that one spot. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the closet knob. The moment her fingertips grazed it, something knocked from inside. A small, sharp tap. Her blood froze in her veins. Another tap. Harder. She stumbled backward, heart hammering, breath trapped in her chest. She grabbed her phone and dialed 911, her hands shaking so violently she nearly dropped it. The call didn't connect. No ring, no error, just silence. She stared at the screen. No signal. Her apartment should have perfect coverage. She lived downtown. She had never lost service before. Her eyes slowly drifted back toward the closet door. It was open wider, a few millimeters more, but enough that she knew it had moved, on its own. "Not again," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Not here." She backed away slowly, retreating to the far side of her living room. She didn't dare turn her back, didn't dare blink. Her mind raced. Had something followed her? Had something escaped? Was this what the message meant? Before it gets out. But if it was in her apartment, she wasn't outside it. She was locked inside with it. The closet door creaked. This time, fully, swinging open with a long, painful moan. Darkness poured out. Not literal darkness, but something that felt like darkness, like an absence of air, like an absence of warmth or safety. It seeped into the hallway floor, a shadow that seemed to peel itself from the inside of the closet and unfurl across the wall. Evelyn's knees weakened, her chest tightened. She couldn't breathe. A whisper slipped out from the black, soft as a draft of cold wind against her ear. Her body went rigid. She had heard that voice, in the house, on the phone, in the voicemail, now in her home. Her instinct screamed, "Run!" But where? The front door was behind the spreading shadow. The window overlooked a 3-story drop. Her bedroom was a dead end. The bathroom had no lock that could stand against something like this. She took several trembling steps backward, her mind scrambling for any option, any exit, any plan. Her back pressed against the wall. She couldn't go further. The shadow stretched towards her. Her breath trembled, shallow and broken. "Stay away," she whispered. It didn't stop. It reached the base of her feet. Cold, unbearably cold, crept up her legs like ice burrowing beneath her skin. It numbed her knees. It climbed her spine. Her teeth chattered as fear consumed her. The whisper came again, this time from behind her, from the wall itself. "You left the door open." Her throat lurched violently in her chest. "No, I didn't touch it. You left it open. I opened it itself." A deep, bone-trembling silence settled. Then, "Not the house door." Evelyn's breath stilled. Slowly, terrifyingly slowly, she turned her head toward the hallway mirror that hung beside her. Her reflection stared back, wide-eyed, terrified. But the reflection behind her was not hers. A figure stood directly behind her reflection's shoulder. Tall, wrong, twisted, its limbs bent in unnatural angles. Its face was not a face, just an empty stretch of darkness shaped vaguely like a head. Its mouth, if it had one, was a slit of deeper black, as if carved with a knife through shadow. The whisper crawled through her skull. "You left your other door open." Her mind scrambled. Her other door? Her bedroom door. The one that was cracked open when she entered. The one she never left open. Something had entered her room. Something was there before she even arrived. Cold dread washed through her as she stared at the mirror. The shadowy figure tilted its head slowly, as though examining her reflection. Her pulse thudded. The figure reached out a long, thin arm, a shape like a hand pressed against the back of her reflection's shoulder. But she felt nothing. No touch. Not yet. The whisper slithered into her ear. "It belongs to the house, but you invited it." Her knees nearly gave out. "No," she whispered. "No, I didn't." "You came inside." Her breath hitched. "You let it see you." The mirror rippled. The figure behind her reflection leaned closer, the slit mouth stretching, widening, peeling open as though preparing to speak directly into her skull. The apartment lights flickered violently, once, twice, then burst with sharp cracks, plunging her into darkness. Her scream lodged in her throat. A single sound filled the room. Footsteps, coming from her bedroom. Slow, deliberate, coming closer. She fled. Her body moved before her mind caught up, adrenaline surging violently. She sprinted to the kitchen, grabbing the longest knife she could find. She hurled it toward the bedroom entrance, anything to slow whatever was stepping into her hallway. A deep creak answered her. Not the closet, not the floorboards. The front door. Unlocking. Her blood ran cold. The door swung open slowly, as though pushed by a gentle hand. A wave of freezing air rushed in. She backed toward the wall again, clutching a second knife in trembling hands. A voice drifted through her apartment, familiar but distant, echoing from nowhere and everywhere at once. "You have to close the door." Her breath hitched. She recognized the voice. It belonged to the man in the 1998 file, the missing agent. He whispered again, urgent and strained, "Before it finds its way back." She trembled, her voice cracking. "Back where?" A pause, then, "Home." Her heart punched against her ribs. Home, the house. The thing wasn't trying to escape the house. It was trying to return to it, to drag itself back through her apartment, using her as a vessel, using her home as a doorway. She whispered through shaking lips, "What do I do?" The voice answered faintly, "Close the door." She understood. She didn't need to close her closet. She didn't need to close her apartment door. She needed to close its door, the door in the house, the one with "Do Not Enter" carved into it, the one that opened itself, the one she fled from. She needed to go back before whatever was moving toward her bedroom, whatever had slipped into her home, whatever had whispered her name, fully crossed over. Slowly, the footsteps in the hallway stopped. Silence. Then, a second set of footsteps echoed from inside her closet. She didn't look. She didn't breathe. She ran. She sprinted through the open front door, down the hall, down the building stairs, bursting into the night air as though escaping a burning building. She didn't stop, didn't look back, didn't dare to. She jumped into her car, locked the doors, started the engine with shaking hands. Behind her apartment window, something pressed against the glass, a dark silhouette, tilting its head. Watching her leave, its whisper followed her out into the night. "Hurry before I reach you first." Evelyn slammed the gas pedal. She was going back to the house on Ashgrove Lane to close the door before something else did. The storm continued to rage outside as Morgan descended the stairs, each step groaning beneath her weight in long, splintering protests. The walls on either side of her narrowed the deeper she went, as though the house itself were breathing in. The faint string of bulbs that lined the stairwell flickered one by one, pulsing in a slow, staggering rhythm that made it look as if the house were blinking at her. She gripped the rail tightly, but the wood felt damp, almost slick, as though something had run wet fingers along its length just before she had touched it. Halfway down, she froze. The basement door behind her swung shut with the certainty of a slammed fist. She turned instinctively, but the lights above the staircase dimmed until they were only weak orange blots floating in the dark. She tested the door. Locked. The knob refused to turn, as if metal had grown stubborn and old in the seconds since she had crossed the threshold. Morgan. The whisper didn't come from below. It drifted up from between the steps under her feet, as though something were lying on its back beneath the staircase, speaking upward into the wood. She jerked back, pressing against the wall, her breath caught behind her teeth. She stared at the steps and waited for them to move, for fingers to curl around the edges, for a face to push through the cracks. Nothing came, only the whisper curling away like smoke. She forced herself to keep going. Every instinct screamed for her to run back upstairs, to pound on the locked door, to claw her way out of the house if she had to. But she had come too far. She needed proof of what lived here. She needed to know why no agent would touch this place, why the house seemed to have a life and appetite of its own. At the bottom of the staircase, the space opened into a low-ceilinged basement lined with old wooden support beams and moisture-stained walls. The air smelled of mildew and something faintly metallic. A single bulb hung from the ceiling by a long, twisted wire, its glow sickly and weak, barely illuminating the center of the room. The shadows in the corners clung tightly to their shapes, as though too heavy to be pulled out by the light. There was no furniture except a rusted metal table shoved against the far wall and an overturned wooden chair that looked as though it had been thrown rather than dropped. The concrete floor was cracked in a branching pattern that looked almost deliberate, forming lines that seemed to point toward the center of the basement. Morgan felt a cold draft rise from those cracks, as though the house were exhaling beneath her feet. Her flashlight flickered when she aimed it at the far wall. Something was drawn there, carved into the surface with deep, jagged lines. At first, she assumed it was graffiti, the sort of angry kids left behind in abandoned places. But as she moved closer, she realized the carvings were not words. They were sigils, circles intersecting with sharp angles, symbols that looked ritualistic. At the center was a crude drawing of a door and a hand reaching toward it from the other side. Morgan stepped back, swallowing hard. She wanted to photograph everything, document the markings, prove that something unnatural had occurred in this house. But every time she raised her phone, the camera app refused to open, locking itself as if resisting the idea of looking directly at the symbols. A deep thud sounded beneath the floor. It wasn't the soft creak of settling wood. It was heavy, intentional, close. Morgan held her breath. Another thud followed, louder, echoing through the concrete like a fist striking from below. Dust sifted down from the ceiling. The bare bulb swayed gently on its wire. She wasn't alone in the basement. Something was moving beneath her. She stepped backwards slowly, her shoes scraping lightly on the concrete floor. She turned the flashlight downward, following the cracks branching out beneath her. One of the central cracks shuddered. The concrete pulsed as though something alive was pushing upward from below. She stumbled back, hitting the rusted table. The metal screeched against the floor, a sound far too loud in the confined space. The pulsing stopped immediately. Silence devoured the basement. Then, from the farthest corner, beyond the reach of the weak bulb, came a low scraping noise, like bone dragged slowly across stone. Morgan swung her flashlight toward the corner, but the beam fizzled out the moment it touched the wall. The darkness there was thick, almost solid, swallowing the light. She could feel something staring back at her from inside it. "Morgan," the whisper again. This time it came directly behind her. She spun, raising her arms instinctively, but the space was empty. The bulb overhead flickered violently. She felt the air shift, warm, then freezing, then warm again, brushing against the back of her neck like breath. The scraping came again, closer now, much closer. She took a step toward the staircase, but her foot struck something on the floor. She looked down. It was a small folded piece of paper lying perfectly centered in the path. It hadn't been there seconds ago. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. The paper was old, brittle at the edges, stained with watermarks that bled like old tears. She unfolded it slowly. Inside was a message written in shaky black ink. "You went too deep. The house knows you. Do not open the door below." Before Morgan could process the words, the bulb overhead burst with a crack like a gunshot. The room plunged into total darkness. She gasped and dropped the paper, scrambling to turn on her flashlight. It flickered, stuttered, then illuminated, but only for a second. In that second, she saw something standing at the center of the basement. Tall, thin, its limbs too long, its shoulders sharp and uneven, its head tilted as though studying her. The skin, if it was skin, was pale and stretched tight, almost translucent. Its eyes were bottomless pits, reflecting nothing, absorbing everything. Then the light went out. Morgan froze, too terrified even to breathe. She could feel the thing in the darkness now. She could hear the soft, slow pull of air into lungs that didn't sound human. Her phone vibrated violently in her pocket. She pulled it out with shaking fingers. A notification flashed across the screen despite having no signal, no service, no internet. Basement 2 detected. Door unlocked. Morgan's heart plummeted into her stomach. She didn't understand. Another basement? Another level? A door? And then she heard it. A heavy latch sliding open beneath her feet. The concrete floor shifted slightly, as though a panel beneath her had unsealed. A cold draft rushed upward, stronger than before, carrying with it an unmistakable smell of earth and rot. The thing in the darkness moved again. She heard its foot drag against the concrete. She heard its fingers scrape against the wall, tracing the sigils carved there. She backed toward the staircase, but the steps behind her creaked loudly, as though someone was standing there, waiting. She dared not turn to look, terrified she would find a shape blocking her escape. Another vibration hummed through her phone. Another message appeared. Only after it opens, it will follow you. Run. Morgan didn't hesitate. She bolted up the staircase, taking the steps 2 at a time, feeling the air thicken behind her as something surged upward in pursuit. She slammed into the door at the top, locked. She threw her shoulder against it. The door groaned. She hit it again, harder. She could hear the thing on the stairs now, its limbs scraping, its breathing growing louder, closer. She screamed as she rammed the door a final time. The frame cracked. The lock snapped. She stumbled through, slamming the door behind her just as something struck it from the other side, with enough force to shake the entire hallway. She backed away slowly, trembling from head to toe, her breathing ragged. The house moaned, both around her and underneath her, as though disappointed she had escaped. But she had escaped, for now. She didn't see that the message she dropped in the basement had followed her upstairs, lying perfectly unfolded at her feet. The last line had changed. You can't leave now. The door below is open. Morgan ran blindly down the hall, gripping the railing as she rounded the corner, her breath sawing through her chest in broken bursts. The storm outside slammed rain against every window, each drop sounding like a fingernail topping urgently on the glass. She could hear the house groaning around her, the beams stretching and creaking as though something inside the walls were shifting into place. She stopped only when the floor beneath her feet vibrated, a dull tremor that pulsed up through her shoes and into her legs. She pressed her back against the wall, listening as the vibration grew stronger. It was rhythmic, like footsteps, but buried deep below the floorboards, coming from the newly opened chamber beneath the basement. The floor breathed beneath her, expanding and contracting with unnatural life. She forced herself to move toward the foyer, gripping her keys so tightly they dug into her palm. She stumbled toward the front door, flicking the lock open with trembling fingers. The knob wouldn't turn. She twisted harder. Nothing. The metal felt warm, almost hot, as though someone had been gripping it tightly from the other side. She pulled her hand back with a sharp hiss. A fresh message buzzed onto her phone, which should not have been functional inside the house. The screen illuminated her face with a pale blue glow. The notification came from no number, no source, no app she recognized. You can't leave until it finishes watching you. She backed away from the door, shaking her head violently. No, I'm done with this. You don't get to keep me here. Her voice echoed through the empty foyer, too loudly, as though the house were amplifying her fear. She felt the temperature drop sharply, her breath turning faintly visible. The lights flickered. The shadows in the corners stretched upward, distorting as though something tall were standing within them. Footsteps creaked along the upstairs landing. Slow, heavy, too deliberate. Morgan stared upward even though she didn't want to, and there, peering between the railings of the second floor, was a pale hand clutching the wooden banister. Long fingers curled over the edge of the railing. The skin was the same sickly, stretched flesh she had glimpsed in the basement. It tightened with a faint crackling sound, like paper being crumpled slowly. Another hand appeared beside it, then something leaned forward. Not enough to reveal itself fully, just enough to let her know it was there, watching. "Morgan!" The voice came from everywhere at once. Upstairs, downstairs, inside the walls, under the floor, a chorus of broken whispers, layered and overlapping, like the voice of someone trying to speak through a shattered throat. She turned and bolted toward the kitchen, hoping to find another exit. The overhead light flickered violently, buzzing as though filled with trapped insects. The cabinets rattled. The window above the sink was fogged over from the inside, as if a face had been pressed against it moments earlier. Morgan grabbed a heavy bar stool and hurled it toward the window. The glass didn't shatter. It didn't even crack. The stool bounced off as though the window were made of reinforced steel. The house hummed. Its walls expanded slightly with a long, low creak. It was sealing itself. She staggered back, then spun toward the hallway, searching for something, anything she could use. Her eyes landed on the closet door near the dining room. She hesitated, feeling a cold dread creep up her spine. Something about that door felt wrong, as though she shouldn't touch it, shouldn't even look directly at it. But it was her only option. She pulled it open. The closet was empty except for a long, narrow strip of wallpaper peeled away on the far wall. Behind it, instead of the expected plaster, there was a small boarded-up gap sealed with old, rusted nails. The boards weren't nailed in place so much as fused, edges melted into each other as though exposed to extreme heat long ago. Her flashlight, still flickering erratically, illuminated something written faintly across the boards in long, jagged strokes. "It remembers. It waits. It comes up when you go down." A loud crash shook the house. Morgan spun, chest heaving. A floorboard in the hall had collapsed inward, splintered from below as something large forced its way upward. Dust poured from the edges of the widening hole. A long hand, impossibly pale, gripped the broken wood, pulling it downward. Morgan ran again, but the house was shifting now. Every step she took seemed to stretch the hall, making the distance to every door elongate impossibly. The house was rearranging itself around her. Door frames narrowed, ceilings lowered. The wallpaper rippled as though something behind it was pushing outward. Her phone buzzed violently in her pocket. She hesitated, terrified of another message, but she checked it anyway. "You can't leave from the house. You are inside its body." A hollow groan shuddered through the walls like a living creature reacting to pain or movement. A crack ran up the length of the hallway, splitting the wallpaper in a jagged line that widened with soft tearing sounds. From inside the crack came a stream of cold air, breath so icy it burned her skin. She backed into the living room, slipping slightly on the rug as she turned. The house exhaled again, this time more forcefully, and the floor vibrated so strongly it nearly knocked her off her feet. Then, from the darkness of the staircase behind her, came the slow, creeping descent of something heavy moving down step by step. It was coming from both directions now, up the stairs and through the floor. Morgan ran toward the back door, the one leading to the overgrown yard behind the house. She twisted the lock. The mechanism jammed. She slammed her shoulder into the wood. It didn't even budge. Her desperation rose like bile in her throat. The footsteps reached the bottom of the staircase. She could hear them clearly now, a dragging sound, uneven and wrong, like bones scraping against each other. Her phone buzzed again. She didn't want to look. She did anyway. "You opened its door. Now it will open yours." A cold hand wrapped around her ankle. Morgan screamed, falling onto the tile floor. She kicked wildly, feeling her foot connect with something solid yet pliable, like cartilage wrapped in stretched skin. She scrambled to her feet, sliding backward until her shoulders hit the cabinets. From underneath the kitchen island, a long arm, far too long to belong to anything human, extended outward. The fingers scraped along the tile, leaving faint, chalky marks behind. Then the head emerged. Not fully, just enough to be seen. Hollow eyes, mouth slightly open, revealing teeth that looked shattered and worn down by years of grinding. The skin was stretched too thin over a skull that seemed too large, too warped. Its limbs folded in on themselves unnaturally, like a creature born in cramped space, forced to adapt into something crooked. The storm outside intensified, wind howling around the house. The lights flickered, then steadied. Every bulb glowed a deep, unnatural amber, illuminating the living room and kitchen with a sickly warmth. The creature crawled forward slowly. Each movement was jerky and wrong. Its joints cracked softly, as though they had never been meant to bend outward. "Morgan," it whispered, but the lips didn't move. The voice came from the walls, from the floor, from the ceiling, from the house itself. She fled toward the living room and grabbed the fireplace poker, holding it in front of her like a weapon. Her hands shook so violently that the metal rattled against the stone hearth. The creature stepped fully into view now, unfolding its limbs with a series of sickening cracks. It stood taller than she expected, almost scraping the ceiling with its hunched shoulders. It didn't rush toward her. It simply pointed, a long, jagged finger extending toward the basement door. The door she had forced open earlier. The door she should never have touched. The house shook violently, sending dust and loose debris fraying from the ceiling. Morgan backed away, stumbling until she reached the front door again. She didn't care if it burned her. She grabbed the knob and twisted with all her strength. This time, impossibly, it turned. She yanked the door open. The outside world stared back at her, the storm, the rain, the flickering street lamps. She didn't hesitate. She ran, down the walkway, across the flooded street, past the abandoned lots. Her shoes slapped against the wet pavement, splashing through deep puddles. She didn't look back. She couldn't. She felt the house's gaze on her spine, burning like a spotlight. Only when she reached her car did she dare glance back. The house stood perfectly still. No movement, no shadows shifting behind the windows, no creature emerging from the doorway. Just silence, just darkness, just an ordinary structure. As though it hadn't hunted her, as though it hadn't breathed, as though it hadn't opened its door beneath the basement. Morgan fumbled with her keys, swinging the car door open and falling inside. She twisted the ignition. The engine sputtered, choked, then roared to life. She didn't waste a second. She drove until the house disappeared behind her, swallowed by the storm. Only then did she look at her phone sitting on the passenger seat. A new message glowed on the screen. "Thank you for letting us out. We are behind you now." Morgan slammed on the brakes, the tires skidding across the slick pavement. In the rearview mirror, something sat upright in the back seat. Pale, crooked, smiling. The house didn't need to keep her. It only needed her to leave. Because some things inside it were never meant to be sealed. And now, they weren't.